truly our desire to have God in our lives, to allow God's way to move through us, because so many times we feel pressed by our realities. We feel pressed by the appearances in our lives. Yes, we have times of celebration and joy and love, but most often it's the hardship, it's the problem, it's the challenge that captures our attention. It's those feelings of anger and resentment and sadness that seem to engulf us in darkness sometimes. And I am so grateful that I have unity in my life, and that unity is here for you with spiritual principles and practical tools that we all can employ to navigate those waters of darkness and despair, to turn that tide, to truly say, God, have your way in me. Unity and other new churches are well known for the ability to articulate formulas for healing, formulas for prosperity, formulas for abundant living. Just last week at Kwanzaa, I iterated Unity's 3-step process for self-determination, for that process of realizing and experiencing the kingdom of heaven that God has intended for us to experience. Now, if I had drawn a diagram, it would look something like this. Here is the present. In the present, we realize what we want. And then we use the power of our imagination to visualize what that future is going to be like. This is magnificent, because from the present, we can take that leap into pure potential, into possibility, into that right and perfect job, that right and perfect partner, that right and perfect car or house or vacation, the right and perfect publication of that book you've written, or the contract that you've got for your music, or that right and perfect healing that is yours to have. You deserve it. So this is the process, and that's comforting. That's wonderful that we can wrap ourselves around in this moment with that vision and that idea of the future. It's a life full of optimism and hope. But that comfort that we take can be a little tricky, because I've had a lot of stressful events in the last several years in my life. So I know I have gained a tremendous amount of comfort of living in that dream state of the future, that of peace, when my divorce is final, or when I finish going through that grieving process for my mother passing, or having my brother graduate from the wheelchair to the walker, or finishing my ministerial program. I just take great comfort with that. But here's the dilemma and the tricky question. If I am spending all that time in my head with those thoughts, am I really experiencing my present? Okay, no. That space between the present and the future can be called the divine divide. It's that space where, yes, we know we're fluid, and ultimately the truth is there's oneness, so our present is our future, and our future is our present. There's ultimately that. But in our reality, in our real life experience, there actually is a distance, and it's called the gap. And the goal then is to close that gap, or to bridge that gap, so that we can pull that future to us in the present. And then we can experience that divine right perfection, that divine holy heaven that God has intended us to experience. So step number 1 in building that bridge is self-awareness. Self-awareness is the opportunity for us to take stock. What are our skills? What are our talents? How much money do we have in the bank? What kind of contacts do we have in the community? Do a self-assessment online. What are our physical strengths? What are our emotional strengths? What are our spiritual strengths? Get feedback from a trusted friend or a professional. What is it that you see in me? And then take all of that information, all of those discoveries, and distill it down so that we have a really clear picture of who we are. It takes courage to engage in the process of self-awareness. But what I know is the strength of God lives in each and every one of us. And that at any time we can ask for help if we need it. And at any time we could go back to school if we wanted it. And at any time in this spiritual community we can request prayer. So that courage then becomes, through the process of self-awareness, that foundation to build the bridge on. If we don't have a solid foundation, we're not going to have a very good bridge. And the foundation that we need to build is the one that's right here in the present. Don't laugh when I tell you you can't build the bridge from somewhere else. You can't build the bridge from the future. You have to build the bridge from right where you are. Step number 2 is self-acceptance. Oh yes, appreciating all the different parts of us. Loving and accepting all the different parts of us. Recognizing and embracing all the different parts of us. So the parts that are big and powerful and strong, and the parts that are small and weak. The parts that are happy and the parts that are sad. The parts that make good, wise, healthy choices, and the parts that make the other kinds of choices. God sees the entirety of us. God sees the whole of us, and God loves us. So all of the parts are important. Imagine building the structure for your bridge and not using all the parts. You got to use all the concrete, all the bricks, all the rebar. When my kids were little, they played with Legos. When I was little, I played with wooden blocks and Lincoln logs. But early on, we all discovered that you have to use all the pieces in the set in order for the structure to be strong enough when the next kid comes around. So when we love and accept and appreciate all the parts of ourselves, which takes courage, then we can see ourselves. We can have the courage to see ourselves as God sees us. The third piece is faith. Jesus said, "Upon this rock I will build my church." Now, Jesus, if he had known about this process in our language, would have said, "Upon the rocks of self-awareness and self-assurance, I will build a bridge that will take you straight to the gates of heaven." Faith is an incredible power that's available to us when we step into it with courage. And if words are one way of expressing it, a video clip is another.
Only in the leap from the lion's head will he prove his worth. Impossible. Nobody can jump this. It's a leap of faith.
You must believe, boy. You must believe.
Personification of faith and personification of courage, and I am holding the vision that someday I too am healed of my fear of heights. Even watching it, I tremble and shake. But I just think Indiana Jones has got it all going on, and taking that step into the great potential of the abyss and finding solid ground is what faith is all about. I've used the word courage a lot today. Ambrose Redmoon, who is a writer who wrote way back in 1990, but it's still true today. Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something else is more important than fear. So yes, Indiana Jones had fear, but his desire to save his father was more important than fear. His faith was more important than that fear, and his courage is more important than that fear. I want to really have you know that courage is a vital process of bridging this gap. I use the word courage and not confidence, because confidence is something totally different. And if I had to wait to feel confident before stepping out, I would still actually be back in somebody else's office. You know what I mean? In a different company. But with courage, sometimes it takes just a thread to start pulling in that vision of the future. There's a wonderful Sufi story that goes like this. Becoming angry with his prime minister, a king had him confined in a very high tower with no way to escape. If he tried to jump, he would surely be killed. The king did not know it, but on his way to the tower, the prime minister had whispered something in his wife's ear. On the very first night, she came and left an ordinary insect on the tower wall. She applied a little honey to its antenna, and the insect began to climb up the tower in search of the honey. But she had tied a silk thread to its tail. Slowly, the insect climbed the 300 feet of the tower, where the minister was waiting for it. He grabbed at the silk thread, to which the wife had tied a string. And to the string, she had tied a cord, and attached to the cord was a strong rope. The minister pulled till he had the rope in hand, and with its help, he climbed down from the tower. The story states that not only did the minister escape the prison, but he also discovered the means to escape from life's ultimate prison. If even the thinnest, weakest thread comes to hand, there is no difficulty in attaining liberation. The weakest thread can pave the way to beatitude, but the thread must come to hand. A slight ray, once recognized, can lead to the sun. All religions, all gurus have reached God by catching hold of one thin thread or another. So I invite you to be courageous, to look at yourself in self-awareness, to be courageous and look at yourself in self-acceptance, and to be courageous and take that leap of faith. Let's make that commitment together. I grab hold of self-awareness and self-acceptance as I courageously step out in faith. Now, there are some hand motions to this. I grab hold of self-awareness and self-acceptance as I courageously step out in faith. Shall we do it together? I grab hold of self-awareness and self-acceptance as I courageously step out in faith. One more. I grab hold of self-awareness, self-acceptance as I courageously step out in faith. Breathe. How beautiful you are. How beautiful you are right here in this present moment. I invite you to close your eyes as we enter a time of meditation, a time to look with the eyes of God, to look with our heart at what thin silk threads are available to us right now as we pull the future to us, as we build that bridge across the divine divide in the silence.